Hey, everybody. It's Jason. I know you've heard my voice many times in the podcast, and I'm here to tell you about something very interesting coming up. I want to let you know about an incredible opportunity for you to get free tips and strategies to build and monetize your personal brand. My good friend Rory Vaden is a New York Times bestselling author and Hall of Fame speaker, and he and his wife founded a company called Brand Builders Group. And they have put together a huge online summit where they're interviewing some of the most influential personal brands in the world on their never before shared secrets of how they became who they are today. So who's speaking at the summit? We've got Lewis Howes, got Michael Hyatt, Dennis Rodman, Kevin Harrington, Jay Baer, Donald Miller, and more. This is a rare opportunity for you to hear the stories about how they became New York Times bestselling authors, how they built high-paid keynote speaking careers, how they have grown massive online followings, and exactly what they have done to create large, multi-seven-figure businesses. If you're someone who is looking to create any type of influence, you have to check this out. It's totally free, and you're going to be learning from the masters who've actually done this. So I want you to encourage you to head over to the show notes today. And in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to this summit. Again, completely free. Take a look at it. I feel super confident you will find it valuable. And now, enjoy the episode. My guest today is Kison Patel. He is the founder and CEO of M&A Science, a family of companies that focuses on mergers and acquisitions for companies. He's also an author, a two-time author, soon to be a three-time author from what I understand, a podcaster, a content creator. Welcome, Kison. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. I always like having fellow podcasters on because we kind of know what's going on. Some people are like, I've never been on a podcast, or like they don't understand what it means to host a podcast. So I can't wait to get to know you. We were just catching up before we started press record here. We don't know each other at all.
Yep.
So we have looked at each other for the first time, connected for the first time. So I think we'll learn quite a bit about each other in the next 50 minutes. So I think we should just go ahead and kick it off. What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right. First question for you. What's something you nerd out about?
This podcasting. It's a new thing.
Nice.
I think for me, it's something new, but it's something I never in my life thought I would do. I was always a highly introverted person that was just a nerd in general. So you asked what to nerd about.
Yeah.
I think starting a tech company, I don't know what it was. Part of it was you get out there and know you have to network and be social, and started doing stuff. But I always had that big fear of getting in front of people, talking, public speaking. And it was about 6 years ago, a friend of mine in marketing was like, "Hey man, you should do a podcast." And I was like, what the hell's a podcast?
Yeah. So it's a little pre-podcast boom. It's like it was there, but it wasn't like how it is today.
No, and he was insistent. He's like, "You just got to do one." It was ironic because there was the podcast movement conference, which was like the podcast conference that happened to be in Chicago the next month. And so he came to me and was like, "Yeah, come with me." And I learned about it. I got into the culture. I started networking with all these other podcasters, and it really piqued my interest that they just have so many different directions and themes and how creative and the culture with it. I think it was that really drew me in, and it really got me to nerd out. I started learning about the equipment, especially the whole ecosystem equipment behind it. You can nerd out.
Oh my God. That stuff. Yeah. I don't, I obviously I do an interview style podcast, and I have people like you who show up, and for everybody listening, you've got a really professional setup. You've got a boom mic, you got a pop filter, you've got a nice set of over-ear monitors. I have guests to show up and they have nothing. They're like using their MacBook microphone. They're like, "Does it sound good?" I'm like, "Yeah, it sounds fine. It's not as good as a microphone, but we're obviously doing this virtually." So I can tell when people either have a podcast or do a lot of podcasts because they generally will show up with some equipment. I'm like, "Oh, you know what a pop filter is and what a boom microphone and a shock absorber is." So yeah, you look very professional. I can tell you've been podcasting longer than I have.
I should have told you I just started a month ago. Then you really would have felt nerded out about all this.
You'd be like the guy on the golf course with the really expensive golf clubs who's shooting like 110. You're like, "I don't really know what I'm doing, but I've got really nice equipment."
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, how many episodes have you done of your podcast?
I don't know if you have the backlog thing, because we have probably 120 published. But then there's a good like 2 months in there, probably at least 8 to 10 that are just in various editing backlog.
Yeah.
We release them weekly.
Yep.
So there's a good 130, but then there's a lot of content we create that we don't publish on the podcast feed because we do the online school. And I'll get involved with the production of that, where you'll essentially do interviews. They go through a different editing process where if you follow a micro learning format, you're just trying to chop these videos up as small as you can with a little point to it. And then it turns into a course. So you'll add a quiz and make a sort of a badge. And you may take a collection of those courses and turn it into a certification. So we do a lot of that that doesn't get published. And then a lot of the interviews I do, because it is an educational interview, I will do a prep call. I'll spend a half hour to hash out the topics, do a little research around it, and line up an outline to have it flow together. But yeah, so there's so we're 120, but plus like a little extensions off of it.
Yeah. I usually have, you mentioned the backlog. I had a time earlier this year where I had 16 backlogged and I release weekly, and I'm like, I can't do that anymore because you end up talking about things that aren't timely.
Yeah.
And you have guests who are like, hey, when's my podcast episode coming out? I'm like, 2 months from now. So I try to lower my threshold. Like I try to not have more than like 6 or 7 at the most in the can that are ready to go out. So I think right now I have like 6 or 7. And then I'm not opposed to releasing bonus episodes or things if I have a conversation with somebody like, hey, this should come out sooner. But it's an interesting world. It's I didn't go to Podcast Movement this year, but I was actually in Nashville when it was I was there the day before it took place. Podcasting is an interesting industry. There are some interesting cats out there that want to be like Joe Rogan. Like, I'm going to be a podcaster and make $1 million. I'm going to tell anybody listening right now, and you probably know this too, the monetization strategy for podcasts is not an easy thing to do.
I can't imagine doing it now. I think we got lucky in our industry. There's only 4 or 5 covering the space, and they were all pretty bad. Now there's over 50. And we got in early and built and even that like first year one is nothing. There's nothing to anticipate or expect back. I'm starting another one this year. I started a personal podcast about leadership. It's called Boss Move. And in that, but it's still, we're doing stuff that we did back then, like way more than what we did back then with M&A. So let me say, we just put it on there. And that was it. You forgot about it. You put it on Libsyn and done. Here we're doing the full gamut, but you just nowhere close to as many downloads. Maybe we're getting like 50 when a new one we publish.
Yeah, I was just wrap on this one because I'm sure people are probably tired of hearing us geek out on podcasts, but the latest stats I read last night are advertisers will pay about $50 per 1,000 downloads. And if you get 1,000 downloads, I believe you're in the top 1% of all podcasts worldwide or something like that.
Oh, wow. I think we serve this small niche. So it's really, it's all corporate M&A. These are the folks that work at public companies that manage M&A. So we'll sell on a case with that. And we've got one that's at $20K for a month. Yeah, you can definitely, if you size the market and you've got I think there's something there. You got to know your niche. Yeah, you've niched.
Yeah, you've niched.
If
right?
you niche really well,
you've got a group of bleep it. Yeah.
Well, now you're going to the people that this audience has a lot of value to them. Like one single deal out of this completely pays for anything we're asking for.
Absolutely.
And when you just make it clear as day, like of the thousands of people we just sent to you, and one of them's got to convert, like you obviously know. And whether you track it for a month from now or 3 months because they're a long sales cycle, you'll get it. So that's there's definitely there. I think there's the right formula to it. But you're right. Yeah, you generally can't wake up and start a podcast to make money and make a career.
No, you can't be like, I want to be Dax Shepard or Joe Rogan and like wake up and expect that you're going to have advertisers coming to knock on your door because you're a good interviewer or you have some sort of thing. But I think you're right. The niching, which this is not a niche podcast. This is the opposite. This is a wide freeform interview podcast with all types of people. So my audience is just people that like to listen to me talk and listen to my guest and like my guests, so it's a very different thing. Let me ask you about your comfort zone and something that is inside your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's. And you'd mentioned public speaking used to be outside your comfort zone.
Yep. 100%.
But it sounds like you practiced that and done that. So what's something now besides public speaking? Because that's the one that's on the nose for me. What's something that you're really comfortable doing that you know people that are very uncomfortable doing?
Talking about startup failures in general, like
Interesting. I
really,
love that answer.
I feel like some people, especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're doing your first venture, you make a lot of screw ups. And I don't know, I don't mind talking about it. If it's a lesson I learned and you can get it out there and help somebody else shorten their learning curve, like why not?
Yeah.
I think in M&A, it's a similar thing. You know, there's things, right? But more so around the company, right? Where you lived it day to day and you own it. Um, that's probably one.
That's a really cool answer. Why do you think it is that people are unwilling to get vulnerable or that, or share what you would label as a failure?
I think it's our nature. Like by default, we want the world to think good of ourselves, right? And us personally want to think good about ourselves, right? That's the nature. I want to think of myself as a good person that makes the right decisions.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that's where it goes to like, and now the other objectively, if you're building a discipline to get better, you have to be very comfortable in criticizing yourself.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, no, that's a shitty thing. That's what sucks about me. And I'm going to be very objective on making myself better in that area.
Yeah. Is this something you mentioned leadership. Is this something as a leader that you encourage your teams to be open about their failures and what, to me, like failure is fine. It's what do you do next to incrementally improve or, completely do a 180, whatever the thing may be. Is this something you encourage in the people that you work with?
Yes, 100%. Encourage them to talk about their failures. I think also help others identify their failures. You know, a lot of times we get a little defensive when you get the criticism, but my goal is to create an environment or culture where we're very comfortable with that criticism. I have no problem telling you, but at the same time, I want you to know I'm not criticizing to hurt your feelings. I'm doing it because I want to help you improve. If you improve, the whole team improves.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a powerful philosophy. I worked, just looking back at my career. One, I was part of a really terrible M&A, notoriously bad. Sprint Nextel. I worked at Nextel, and we merged with Sprint, and I believe 2 years later they wrote off the entire value of the Nextel part of it, which was like 29 billion or something like that. It was just a wash. And I'm also thinking about the culture at that company at the time, and it was a long time ago. Was you didn't really talk about failures. And I worked in sales, which is also like the ego driven, like it's very ego driven. Like, that's not a thing. You don't go to your boss and be like, hey, let me tell you about the things that didn't go so well. You're like, oh, let me tell you about the deals I have and all this. So like, I think maybe that's a culture that's been more developed or it's more accepting in 2021 than it was, 15 years ago.
I think, you have to, because that's the value of it. It's creating a dynamic work environment. I don't mind you making failures as long as you learn from it, because every failure is just a valuable lesson. And as long as you can articulate what you learn from it, there's no problem. If you have a failure and you can't articulate what you learned from it, we have a problem, because I don't want that to happen, especially what it is, right? If it's a mistake is one thing, but a failure, we went out to do something and it didn't work out, because a lot of the stuff that we've done it was never a direct success. It was always a series of failures that we kept iterating on until we got there. My organization, I started in 2012 and had negative tax returns for 7 years. It wasn't like, hey, in my mind, I thought when I started this company, I was going to have profitability in 6 months and I'd be on the beach, like refreshing my Chase mobile app, just watching the number go up.
Yeah, you'd be Tim Ferriss. You're hanging out, working 20 hours a week. It's easy.
Order another cocktail, but no,
no problem.
Absolutely not. But that was the whole thing. It wasn't the reason we're still around is we didn't give up. It was constantly try to get. But as long as you're learning from it, ultimately that's the driver of success, is the learning pattern you create to overcome those challenges and figure out what you got to do quickly.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the other side of that question. And let's take a look at something for you that's outside of your comfort zone that you know is going to be inside of other people's.
Financial modeling. I used to have that knack, always the honors math kid, but I don't like looking at numbers. I don't I hate looking at that shit. I don't like modeling out, forecasting.
That is so not what I expected from somebody who's in the M&A field.
Tech, software. It's funny. I don't know how to balance my checkbook. I just feel like it's the person that the numbers are good, but all this experience working with M&A and everything, I've realized it's all about the people. And that's the stuff that really creates value. Can I align with you? We have a goal. Let's figure out how we're going to do it and go after it. Know who we got to get involved, get them pumped up about this, and let's work at it together. The numbers are always the tactical shit you did. You almost like we're trying to gamify the fucking bank to give you a loan. And I'm sorry if we got to cut it out some sort.
Oh no, we've got a nice explicit check mark on this podcast. We're good. You do your thing.
It's like you're doing it.
I swear in here too.
You're just doing it for the bank to look good. You look good to the bank to get the loan. It's something like that to do some investors to throwing money into this. It's a gamified model. It's good to have one and build around it, but there's one that you market to the bank and to investors that's very, what's the word, like ambitious, a little over the top, versus can you really build it tangible? That's very conservative where I'm going to hit it. That's the reason I don't like the numbers, right? The numbers, we just overinflate them and we get number happy, and the goals become too ambitious and we never hit them. So at my company, here's my metric. I just want to double every year. I want to double my revenue. The head count, it's nice if you can be efficient about it, but main thing is just double. Know I got healthy growth. Know that the customers are happy. Know that we're creating value for them. Being able to understand the amount of value we're creating per customer and then being able to grow off of that versus looking at the numbers. I don't get any of that. That's where I'm not a financial model person anymore. Yeah.
That's such an interesting answer. I'm not a math person. I hated math. And I was a journalism major. So I didn't pick it for the reason, but I'm like, oh, good, no numbers. So for me, that would be a very outside my comfort zone. Also, I'm a executive leadership coach, podcaster, those, I don't really need to worry about numbers other than some basic stuff in my business. I'm so surprised about this answer, and it makes me even more endeared to you that you would say that. Because I would think oh, this guy's in the M&A and, that's all he's looking at is financial models, but you probably got people that do that for you.
I know. Well, and that's where somebody brought it up about building our sales function right now. And that was my head. It was like, hey, I know what we need to build. We need to build the ability to distribute our value and the stories around it from the customers.
Yeah.
But at some point when we 5-10 million revenue, it makes sense. We probably need to think operational efficiency or have those kind of financial metrics to drive ourselves around. And we'll get there, and somebody will be that persona to do that.
Yeah, that'll be a very strategic hire for you. All right, so we're going to take a really brief commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
Okay, we are back. So this is my nice, glorious, very open-ended question. What do you want us to know about you?
What do you want to know about myself?
What do you want us to know about you?
Some of the themes that we built on earlier, resilient. I think that's me. I just love a good challenge and always want to see it through. Being competitive in that nature, but I like that. I'd say resilience, and then the other part, curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that's what's taken me far. Just being really, really curious, even getting that no for an answer. I really want to understand why. Walk me through that. Help me understand. You didn't like my business case. What was it? Is it me? Am I being annoying? I really, really want to understand. I think that's always been the thing. Just why did that person do that? Why did you make that decision? Why did you make that mistake? Or why don't you think that's a good idea? I want to understand. And that framing of curiosity, especially when you can bring it to the conversation. And a lot of times for me in earlier years being very ADD, my own thoughts would always get in the way. And have a conversation, Jason, I'm always thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say to you? How am I going to say something to impress you, make you think I'm smart? That always gets in the way. But when you put it aside and just let curiosity take over, I'm intrigued. I'm just asking you a bunch of questions. I'm trying to learn from you. And that you do. If I can put away what I know, assume what I know is wrong or I know nothing, and be really focused and curious, and learn about you, learn about what challenges you're dealing with, really understand how I can align myself to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve, so much good comes out of it than trying to push your own agenda and the thoughts in your head that are getting in the way. If you can
I'm super aligned with you, Kison. It's so one of the I train coaches as well. I'm a leader at a coach training program, and we like one of the things we start with is people are like, you got to know this and you got to know that and you got to have all these tools. You're like, you've got everything you need if you choose to use it. Your 2 ears, 1 mouth, and your curiosity.
Yep.
And when clients bring things and you just get curious about it as opposed to here's the way you do it or forming an agenda or an opinion, that's what takes you out of like coaching and into expertise, consulting, which there's definitely a time and a place for that. But curiosity is everything. And as I hear you say that, I wish I would have learned this earlier in my career, to be honest with you. And I still struggle with it sometimes. I can look back at my career and take a look at almost no curiosity for about 15 years of my career. Here's the way you do it. I'm going to be the expert on this thing, which got me pretty far, but it wasn't that fulfilling. And there's something really interesting about, I find curiosity to be very fulfilling now.
Yeah.
Like really find out what drives somebody or, like I may not agree with them, but I'm also not them. So getting curious, like, hey, like what is the reason for the decision you made? And not actually saying it's wrong because it's not the way I would do it. It's a lot more. I have a lot more fun coming from curiosity, and I'm always working on it too. Right? I'm not perfect at this.
You feel your relationships become more deeper and meaningful?
Absolutely, because you can meet people where they're at.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to go in there. And I really feel that
there's a lot to go into. Yeah.
It's something that kids should learn. I'm talking to my daughter about it. I've been talking to her about it since she's 7. She's 10 now. And it's, can you get that? Because it takes a long time. It's a life skill that you continually evolve and develop. And then you realize it's the approach to relationship with every single person you interact with. It could be the security person, anybody that you go out some, movies or whatever, restaurants.
Yeah.
But even those small interactions, it falls into that. They ask you, how's your day as a formality, but when you really add detail, I have this little rule with my daughter, thank you and sorry. You can't use those words because they're transactional words. So you need to define the meaning with it. So it's always, thank you.
I'm a dad too. So tell me more. I'm getting some pro tips from you.
Thank you. Thank you for what? So when we go to grocery, we go grocery shopping together. And even if we're checking out, like, I don't care. I don't want you ever using thank you and sorry alone. They're very transactional, meaningless words. Create the meaning with it.
Yeah.
Sorry for what? Sorry I bumped into you. Like, really add that. And it lends to the other lesson around defining the why. If you're asking somebody to do something, make sure you put the why in there. But even the small transactional, it gets the example. Like, thank you for what? Well, we're checking out the grocery store. Thank you for being so fast. Thank you for the friendly conversation. Thank you
love
for
that.
putting up with me. But then you build that as a habit. And then, hey, if I'm asking you for something too, it's the same thing. You got it. People don't, they leave a reason. Nobody ever wants to be told what to do. If you can add a reason to it, even better, instead of telling people what to do, can you take the objective and frame it as a problem, invite them into the conversation as a question? How do we solve X? Or even with the kids, it's like, you can tell them to go clean their room, but it's like, look, we have company coming over tonight, or hey, how do I get your room to be clean? Reason why is we have company coming over tonight, and I want to make sure they have a good impression and think you guys are smart, organized kids.
I love this. So my daughter is 5, and you're inspiring me to think about. I'll just say to her, "Hey, I'll give her something, and I'll say, hey, what do you say?" And she'll say, "Thank you." And half the time I'll say thank you for what, but half the time I won't. And it sounds like I need to build a habit of make it a habit for me, which will then make it a habit for her. And it's 5, we can start these habits now, which is like pure sponge brain. So awesome. The other thing I'm just going to add to this before we move on is and I had another guest a while ago give this to me, is what's the question that we're not asking?
What's the question?
Like when you're like not you and I specifically, but you're in a business meeting or you're with your significant other. What's the question we're not asking? Like that's a curiosity. Like, hey, what's the thing that we're not asking here? And sometimes people will have a thing that they're not willing to ask because they're scared to ask it. But sometimes we're also into our own agenda, not from curiosity, but this is the way you do it, or this is what I want from this conversation or this meeting.
Yeah.
That we're unwilling to look at the question that probably should be asked that isn't actually being asked because there's too much ego. There's too much.
Yeah.
Too much needed to be right.
I remember I would go to these conferences and see the panels and people always do this stuff and ask, and I was just throwing this question, what's the hardest part about your job? Which kind of sounds like something you'd expect in an elementary class, where it's like, what's the hardest part of your job? And it was interesting because it become the most interesting response because they're like, this is what, and it's a very intimate question for them to answer, that this is the hardest part right now. And and it kind of wavers on how they are as a person. They give you a bullshit fluff answer. Did they really articulate that well and give that level of genuinity to you? So there's that. I think along with that is the why, the what, and the how. If you can take those thoughts that you have scrambling around your head and try to reframe some of the thinking into questions. It's always the why, the what, and the how. Then it keeps the conversation going. It allows the other person to pull in and hopefully keeps you listening and learning. And remember, that's what you should be focused on.
Yeah, I love that. I'd like to spend, if you'd be open to it, just a couple minutes on what led you to what you're up to now. Like what led you to the M&A space? Was there any moment of inspiration? Was it something that you aspired to as a student? Like what led you to doing what you're doing today?
M&A is one. I'd say I'm very passionate about M&A. Problem solving, you should be as an entrepreneur. You should be obsessed with problem solving.
Where you make money.
I think then there's some inspirations that led to starting the technology. So 2 parts. There's technology, and a lot of it was around the software industry, how they use project management software. And I noticed that it was getting adopted in other industries like education, construction, and became the light bulb moment of why not project management software for managing these complex M&A transactions, which are the world's largest transactions that happen. And then that's how the DealRoom idea came. M&A was, I don't know, my dad used to tell me stories when I was 10 years old. He's like, you're always talking about things in the millions and billions. We always thought something was wrong with you. And
that's amazing.
I would draw these like car books, and there were cars with rocket boosters, like kind of like spaceship type of cars, right? And I'd always put like little price numbers like that, how much it cost. I don't know.
That's, yeah.
And it's just like this little obsession, like the numbers, all the zeros behind M&A deals that we're talking about things in the hundreds of millions of billions. I don't know, as a kid, like that excited me. Like that kept with me.
That's amazing.
And even when I got into real estate, I wanted to learn about the business transactions right away. I wanted to learn about this. And I remember finding opportunities online that here's companies listed for sale, and they don't put much information. It's like the teaser and you got to call the banker. Well,
sure.
I would just pretend I had buyers and say, yeah, I'm representing this group. And, I want to see the information. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn what do the numbers look like? What makes this a better investment than the other investment? And just got obsessed over it. Wanted to learn about all these different industries. Was like, what is actually the best business to run? There's tens of thousands of different industries and verticals you can get into, hundreds and millions of businesses. What's the best one to own and operate? And I was so curious in searching all these industries and the funny stuff like funeral homes, veterinarian clinics. I remember talking to the head of development of North America for Mercedes-Benz, and he's the one you would go to when you wanted to invest and start a Mercedes-Benz dealership. And he walked me through the resources I need, the capital, revolving credit line to set up the bank, and land costs, etc. I just kept learning. So I think that M&A started with the obsession with these big numbers, and then, kind of lended to, hey, that's what the largest transactions are, to today where we run a tech company that implements lifecycle management. So large public companies can manage the whole life cycle of M&A transactions.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Since you're a fellow podcaster, should be a piece of cake for you. I'm going to give you the host microphone for a few minutes, virtually handing it over to you, and offer to you to ask me a question or maybe two that I can answer for you and everybody else listening. And I have no idea what's coming. So here comes my improv or lack of improv skill. So, Kison, what do you have for me in terms of question I can answer for you?
What are you aspiring for? Where are you trying to go in the next 5-10 years?
Yes. Where am I trying to go? 4-hour work week, hammock, drinks, beach. That's probably my my very aspirational dream. But what I'm actually going for, what I'm working towards is a sustainable business model where I get to have a lot of fun.
That's the dream.
That's the dream. And so I'll be a little more specific. Where I am moving and what I have my eye on is growing the podcast, growing it through a number of episodes. If listeners come, cool. I don't really care so much about that. It's more like continue the podcast. It's one of my favorite things to do. In my business, I was sharing with you before that I'm a few years into my business. And like most entrepreneurs in most industries, I'm really figuring out who I want to work with in industries that have like more of a niche. So I'm getting really clear about who that is. And I think the last thing for me, there's something that I don't quite yet know that I want to do. It feels like a genesis in my mind. I'm pretty creative. There's some things I'm noodling on that I'm not quite ready to share, but I don't quite know what they are, but I know they're coming up for me in the next year or so. And these would be business models around. So I'm formerly a tech person. So I have my eye on doing some technology related stuff in my business that would scale. Similar, it sounds very similar to what you're doing with the educational stuff. And so that's what I see is next for me.
Is there like a problem around that you're looking to solve?
Yeah, I think in the coaching and personal development industry, there's a lot of amazing people and a lot of amazing content, and there's a lot of not so amazing people and not so amazing content. I also think that there needs to be more accessibility for the general population. I don't know if you've ever worked with a coach before, but and it's the work that I do, but I look at my client list. It's quite frankly, it's a pretty privileged group of people in the grand scheme of the world. So I think there's something around, and there's some companies doing some cool stuff around this, like the democratization of providing people more things like, and like better health, better up. They're doing a lot of this, but most of the companies who buy those services are like big tech companies. So they're still like, I'm a Google employee. I get access to these amazing benefits, but those things are still, you got to be a Google employee or a Facebook employee, which by definition means you are in the top whatever % of the world. So I think there's some work to be done around the democratization and really supporting everybody around being able to have a therapist, have a coach, take online courses, things that are going to help better you if you want that aren't going to be cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And I believe there's like, and of course in the business model, there's always what's the happy medium between me supporting myself and supporting my family and also providing a price point that's reasonable for most people to get. So that's what I'm taking a look at.
Yeah. I mean, those are big challenges to solve, is really building equality for people in these different verticals and sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the clients you serve I would assert are quite privileged as well. If you work at an M&A desk at a bank, or you work in M&A in a corporate structure, you're a well-paid employee, likely minimum of a bachelor's degree, likely an MBA or a finance degree. You're somebody who likely has access to resources already personally. And so like by definition, that's another place that's a quite privileged area, which is total. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, there's no, it's not widely accessible to most people.
Yeah. I mean, and those are great models if you can make those benefits accessible broader. I mean,
Yeah.
We've seen that in the private car, the transportation, all
Right.
those models, and there's a lot of areas to apply that. So.
Yeah. Cool question. I've never had anybody ask me about my 5 to 10 year. And I don't even know if it's a 5 to 10 year at this point, but thank you for the thoughtful question, the curious and thoughtful question.
Oh yeah. When we really want to drive into it, we ask for the inversion. What are all the things that you think are going to prevent you from achieving those goals?
Oh,
and then
God.
Then you really get into.
You'll have me in tears by the end of the episode.
There'll be a whole Yeah, I mean,
there'll be a whole vulnerability. We'll start a podcast together and just be all about business vulnerability. Like, one of the things that I don't believe that I can do because of my limiting beliefs or the cards are stacked against me. What are the limits to my possibility?
That's the route you take to make the impossible possible. I promise you that, Jason.
Absolutely. I've seen it even at a small scale in my own little fiefdom over here. Like, I've definitely seen what really resonated. It's all resonated. That the failure thing is like, what did I learn from this experience, or what did I learn from this thing that I spent some money on that didn't really go anywhere? Oh, how do I take that into my next interaction, my next transaction? Huge. That's huge. It's so cliche, but it's the old keep doing the same thing over and over again. Like, you're going to get the same results. And even the people that some of my clients, I see that, like, didn't you try that 3 months ago? Yeah, but this time we have a new VP of whatever. I'm like, but you tried the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen this in your career a lot too, is like, you just go back and do the same thing over and over again and wonder why it doesn't work. You're not willing to get innovative or take additional risks.
Yeah, there's, I think it's like rethinking your leadership framework at that point. One is like, maybe you got a problem with your communication in your organization, thinking of it as a communication platform, because if it's not inviting others, the goal in our company, I think any company, should be to enable anybody in the organization to speak up. Right. The best ideas don't come from me. The best ideas could come.
No.
I had a great one with the most junior developer pitched an idea and became one of our leading features in the software product. And on the same note is, we also want to know about the cracks and what's happening. What are the problems that are occurring? So you got it. Really important to have that communication, very fluid. People are comfortable speaking up. Everybody's ideas are heard. And then you acknowledge everybody's achievements, create an environment where people feel they work amongst friends. Tends to some of those things will be missing. Magic. So it's like, can you go back and check that out and figure out where you can change?
And I think one of the real challenges of what you just described is, how do you scale that as you build it, as you grow your team and you start to put more layers between yourself and the people, like the developers or the salespeople, the people that are actually in the front lines? How do you actually scale it without it feeling like, oh, you get 20 minutes of the CEO a quarter? I'm like,
yeah, no, you got to create these pillars in your organization by defining values. And it's not just making it fluffy that you put in your about page and say, we have these values we live and die by.
Right.
It's like actually living and dying by it, and showing people that you live and die by it, call by now examples, and saying, look, like, one of our things is responsiveness. If we're working, we could be working on $1 billion deal, not even know it because of sensitivity around it. But we're going to treat that level of urgency with all of our clients, all of our deals. That's a core value, is being responsive. We address it from the beginning, from the first interview. In fact, I'm measuring how responsive you are in the follow-up to this interview, because it's all about, that's our core value. So that I think having that, showing the way we do it internally, externally, then it becomes that it's driven. It's part of the culture. That expectation is there. And when you bring in that new person that doesn't have it, people will call it out. I don't have to, the team members will know, like, it took me 23 hours to get that from so-and-so.
Like, TikTok, man, TikTok. Where's that response to my Slack message? Get it over here quickly.
Yeah. So then you want that. You want that culture in the team to self-manage. They'll know when people aren't a fit. Yeah,
that's cool. Got a couple more questions for you. Again, thank you so much for the very thoughtful question. You got my brain turning and you also got my brain turning without me sharing about the gaps that I have, because I've got some gaps and like, oh, what do I not? So like, literally what I'm doing is like, what's the question I'm not asking myself? That's actually what I was thinking as you were saying that. So I'm self-coaching myself, or maybe I'm self-therapy myself. I'll put myself on the couch and grab a tissue box. So Kison, what's the thing that you're most proud of?
It goes back to leadership. I'd say building a team. The team I'm building now, I'm most proud of. I've struggled with this. I remember early days when I first got into a leadership role and was building out a team. I did the stupidest mistakes ever. I did the thing where you hired your buddies from college, and that was one of the stupidest, mistakes ever. It turned out bad. I'd have to pick between the other senior person and your friend, and then you got to give the okay to let them fire them, and it was bad. Just a lot of not knowing how to interact with people. That one-sided conversation, having a balanced perspective. That was a good lesson learned. Was really being able to spend the time to understand where the other person's coming from when we talk about that, being curious and things like that. I wasn't that way. I'd defend get in a dispute with somebody and you're trying to defend it to death with your perspective. It doesn't go anywhere, right? It's just you get stronger about your opinions. And the whole idea is you're supposed to spend the time, argue the other person's perspective. Netflix does that. Yeah. I was reading about their culture.
That's cool.
Yeah, I know I can go riff on and on about, some of these things, but I'd say that the current team is the leadership team that we've developed in the current company, because the culture is to develop leaders through everybody. Right. That way, as you grow, you just have it in there. And it's transparent. You don't just say to the leaders, this is leadership. It's like, you tell everybody in the company, these are leadership characteristics. So it's part of the culture.
Yeah. There's, I have a friend, she likes to say, is this the hill you're willing to die on? I'm like, probably not. This is probably not the place I'm willing to expend all my political and emotional capital to be right, and then have it all burned to the ground.
Yep.
There's nothing left other than I get to be right, and maybe there's a decision that's made that I'm like, this is my idea, but then I burned all the relationship stuff to the ground. It's the hill that you die on.
I like that.
And I said this to my wife, and now she uses this with me, which is really annoying. I'm like, oh, this is what happens when I share with my wife things that work for me in the business world. Now she uses them back on me because she's smart.
All fair game.
Yeah. What's something you're afraid might actually be true about you?
Being blind to weaknesses. I mean, that's always the thing. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something that I don't know about? You think of the 3 buckets. Don't know what you don't know. Know what you don't know, and know what you know. Just kind of across that. And you constantly want to identify the don't knows what you don't knows and move them to the know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that was especially getting into leadership early, running a company. You have a lot of that. And you'll get to a point when you realize how valuable it is. You want to, whether you like it or not, you got to objectively encourage the feedback and ask the people you work with, how do I get better? Acknowledge when they're right. They point something out. Don't make them scared to tell you where you're fucking up as a leader. You want them comfortable to be able to speak up and saying, hey, that was, when you said that to so-and-so, that wasn't cool. Like, that offended the person personally. And then you stop and like, you know what? Either you got to either agree or disagree. And if you disagree,
you got to say something.
You can't disagree and say that I disagree. It's like, no, this and that. Or you acknowledge that, holy shit, I didn't realize that they would take it that way. I screwed up, and I can see why they would have. Let me, I'm going to make it right. I'm going to go talk to that person and make it right. I want to blah, blah. But you got to own it. And I think that it teaches them. It teaches like that as part of your operating way. So I don't know. I think that
I had an experience with this just yesterday, and I call it intention versus impact. And my intention felt really good on my side. And I showed up a certain way to a certain person, and the impact was not my intention. Like, the actual impact on them was not the intention that I had. I had nothing but good intentions, and it did not land that way. And so I'm happened about 24 hours ago. So I'm thinking about, I actually owned I owned it, and I owned that, like, the things that I said and the way I showed up was not, and this is in a business setting, I didn't make any excuses, and I own the impact, but then I think I backpedaled and tried to make an excuse, but I meant to, like, and I'm just like, no, just stop yourself. Like, the other person's experience is just their reality. Yeah. So to try and argue with how you made somebody feel, like, there's probably something for people to own about, like, what's the thing that triggers them, and maybe to grow in that. But at the end of the day, like if people feel a certain way, that's their real experience. And there's nothing I'm going to do to argue with them or tell them like, no, you took it wrong. Like you just have to own. I think that's something, one of the core hallmarks of the best leaders, are they own their impact. They own their impact, and they own what it means when they say something, when they do something, and they don't. And even if they don't agree, they're willing to say, "Hey, I know this has impacted you." They can still disagree, or they can say, you can say something like, "Well, that wasn't my intention, but like, hey, I understand this impacted you, and I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for X, Y, Z." Like you said earlier, not just I'm sorry, because they're like, "What are you sorry for?" Like, for having to have this conversation with you when I want to go be at the golf course.
Yeah. And I think even leading in with that curiosity to like clarify that, hey, hey, I got some assumptions that you're pissed off about X, Y, Z, and then let them step back and acknowledge it. Be like, yes, I am. Or, you know what? No, and make sure we covered some good life lessons here on this.
Got some good life. I mean, this is what this podcast is for, is we talk some business, we talk some life stuff. I got a free parenting tip. I love it. So this is, we're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes. I call this my philosophy question. How do you see the world?
I see the world as freedom, opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is from the moment you wake up, and you need to value it. There's some people in this world that don't have that freedom, but you do. And with that freedom is boundless opportunities and value to gain, and experiences, knowledge, wealth. And that's all yours from the moment you wake up. And it's not for you to consider whether you want to wake up or not, roll around bed for an hour. Like, you should be driven and snap up and really be ready to play the game and charge with that drive. Recollect what your priorities are, what you're looking to achieve early in the day, and have that drive and be on it. Be able to have discipline, know that you're going to come across things that'll make you uncomfortable, but that's your ability, your skill that you're developing internally to make yourself stronger, to be out of body, to do those things you're uncomfortable doing and get comfortable doing them. That's what allows you to really get things done, to have that drive to cash in on that freedom. Like, you have it, but it's worthless if you don't do anything with it. So if you can actually take it and do something with it, you can go out with this drive, with goals. What do you want to do? What kind of problems in the world you want to go out and solve? How you want to make an impact? And you build these goals, and you're after it. You're doing these things, whether it's public speaking, you don't like it, and whatever, and you're getting yourself comfortable doing it. You will. That's what we have in this world, is freedom, and how you use it makes the biggest difference. And you can do you can do anything you want. You can literally do anything you want in this world. You have it. Having that and some curiosity and just wanting to learn, you'll go so freaking far. So far.
You can say fucking. I'll say fucking. That's cool. That's very cool.
I don't normally swear on podcasts. This is the most I've ever sworn on a podcast, Jason. I don't know if it's just comfortable with you, or
it's like Joe Rogan. It's like we're like on the Joe Rogan podcast. We're just kind of cussing. It's hilarious. Yeah, I do not care.
I'm not allowed to cuss on my podcast. I'll get in trouble.
You're not. Well, because you have a bit more of a business podcast. You probably don't have the explicit check mark on yours. I checked that thing as soon as I created this. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what my guests are going to say. I don't want to, I don't know how that actually works. If I didn't
get that far to like think about it. I just got told by marketing not to swear on the podcast. So
that probably makes sense when you're talking about mergers and acquisitions and such.
I guess.
So how can people connect with you, find more about what you're up to, the company you run, you personally, get some parenting tips, like what, like text, give us your phone number. They'll text you.
Yeah, I got it all. If they're interested in M&A, MAScience.com, M&A Science. Yep. We have over 350 published pieces of content about M&A. And I think they got the new M&A 101 little area they're launching. So anything anybody wants to learn about M&A, it's all in there. And then myself, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't use most of the social platforms, but I really enjoy connecting with people on LinkedIn. And it's just Kison, Kison Patel on LinkedIn. You'll find me.
Awesome. All this will be in the show notes as well. I'm not expecting people to be jotting this down as they're driving or walking or sitting. That'll all be in the show notes. Well, Kison, I want to thank you so much for being on today. It was great. Yeah, we met each other 54 minutes ago, so here we are. I feel like I feel like I know you. I know quite a bit about your philosophy on life. So this will be a fitting wrap up. I'd love if you would leave us with some words to wisdom, some short and sweet words to wisdom that you like to live by and you want us to live by as well.
Life is all about lost opportunities.
Oh, that's dark.
Life
is all about lost opportunities.
The funny part is I overheard a homeless person say that to another person,
That's great.
And it stuck in my head. It just,
yeah.
Like he's right. Life is all about lost opportunities. You're there. You just got to take it. Go for it. Do it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, I wish you and the team the very best in all you're up to. Thank you so much for being on. And I'm sure we'll be connected again soon.
I had a lot of fun, Jason. Anytime.
Thanks,
Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Kison. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.